Batman Arkham Origins is the odd man out for the franchise. Some loved it, most didn't. Welcome to part 3 of my 4K documentary, Batman Arkham Rises. Today we will learn about the design and development of the worst received game in the series. Thank you all for watching, please subscribe. Origins is the first to not be made by Rocksteady and was not written by Paul Dini. Instead being developed by WB Games Montreal, and the story was created by the group of writers Corey May, Ryan Gaeta, and Duma Wenshu. I personally believe this is the worst Arkham game in the franchise based off of the boring storyline and often repetitive gameplay. If you played any of the other Arkham games, you know which characters are going to die, and it makes the story arcs severely lack suspense. It also has a big voice acting dilemma. With Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill working with Rocksteady on Arkham Knight, they simply did not have time to work on both games. Origins has a big immersion problem because of this. The fans were used to Conroy and Hamill as Batman and the Joker, only to be replaced with younger actors. Troy Baker's Joker voice was not bad at all, but something just sounds off. It didn't sound like the Joker was talking. It felt closer to a Mark Hamill impersonation instead of his own version.
Here, have a laugh on me! Do you hear that? Sounds like 8 tiny reindeer!
As for Batman, they tried to get a less mature sounding voice, as it is a prequel, and hired Roger Craig Smith. To me, his version of Batman doesn't sound like a young Kevin Conroy. Instead, it sounds like the voice director just told him to talk as low as he could. His voice is inconsistent, much like my own. Some moments while he is talking as Batman will give you goosebumps.
I'm not playing games, Slade.
But when he is using his higher-pitched Bruce Wayne voice, it is nowhere near what we are used to in the cartoons and video games. If you have never played an Arkham game and Origins was the first one you tried, you might not have an issue with his voice. But for those of us who played the previous games and watched Batman the Animated Series in the 90s, it just sounds strange. Besides the two most important characters being a disappointment compared to Asylum and City, the supporting cast totally picks up the slack. Nolan North, famous for playing Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games as well as Dr. Richtofen in Call of Duty Zombies, once again plays the Penguin and does an incredible job in transforming his voice. Think about how different those three characters sound: an American action hero, a crazy German scientist, and cranky old British cobblepot. In my opinion, he's one of the most talented voice actors ever, simply because of his variety of voices.
Hold on a bloody minute! I seen your act! I ain't done nothing you not done!
Black Mask, put a bounty on my head. Where is he?
I don't keep tabs on every geezer with a grudge. You're not a popular bloke in this town.
You're running out of time.
Wait. Lacey Towers. There was a murder. It was supposed to be his same house. Or Black Mask. He's got problems of his own, I'd say. Someone broke in there.
Thankfully, the side characters held their own because the main two simply were not up to par. With my gripes about the voice acting out of the way, Arkham Origins is a pretty fun experience, mostly because of the interesting setting and timeline, not because of the story. Arkham Origins was inspired by Frank Miller's Year One as well as The Man Who Laughs and a bit of The Killing Joke. This was the first Batman game to be set in actual Gotham City. Although the map is basically the same as Arkham City, it does have another area to explore connected by the massive bridge. It is Christmas Eve in Gotham. Bells are ringing, lights are gleaming, and Black Mask has hired 8 assassins to find and kill the Batman. Great. It takes place 7 years before the events of Arkham Asylum. It starts off with Batman trying to stop a jailbreak at Blackgate Prison. This game attempts to have a more comic book vibe to their storyline with non-stop villains popping in and out, but it ultimately fails to achieve this without a good connecting story. Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City feel like you are playing through a comic book because it was written by a masterful comic and television writer, Paul Dini. Arkham Origins feels like a video game about a comic book. This is mostly because of bad choices in development. WB Montreal started working on the prequel to Asylum in 2012. The game was then later announced on April 9th, 2013. The creators of the franchise, Rocksteady Studios, needed extra time to make Batman Arkham Knight because they were shifting from the Unreal 3 engine to Unreal 4. However, WB did not make the same transition for Arkham Origins. Instead, they used Rocksteady's outdated, modified Unreal 3 engine previously used on Arkham City. UE3 once ruled the 2000s as engine of choice for many developers, but during the shift to newer hardware on the consoles and PC, it really started to show its age. And this was a big issue for anybody playing on Steam. To this day, on modern hardware, two GTX 1070s for example, the game stutters constantly and only has a smooth frame rate while indoors. When gliding around Gotham, expect anywhere from 60 to 4 on the frame rate. I think the awful performance was caused by a rushed release window and a focus on the console builds over the PC, and it shows. Another strange development choice that WB Montreal made was continuing the support of PhysX. This is a NVIDIA-built particle system that basically renders the movement of leaves, snowflakes, and dirt based off of wind and colliding particles. That is basically a fancy way of saying have terrible performance for the sake of particles. They sort of fell into that strange thing NVIDIA does, where they push these new technologies onto devs that are really not designed for current or even near future hardware. After getting these devs like Rocksteady or CD Projekt Red to sign off on some strange feature like individual hair physics, they then do not help the team actually optimize it as much as they should, leaving us with often broken settings. This completely happened in Arkham Origins. It's very odd because it was completely built around this switch to DX11 while still maintaining a DirectX 9 option. This must have made for some very angry programmers because they had to design a PC port that would basically need separate drivers depending on what shadow options you decided to pick. This is why when you change certain settings in various games, it will ask you to restart before they can be applied. The PC is trying to find the best DX driver. That's what it's doing. Anyways, I had to mention the performance during this section because it is a major issue and it could have been solved in development, but it never was. Another thing to note is that it didn't take WB Montreal that long to make this game, mostly because they didn't have to design it from scratch. They reused many models and textures for the environments and kept combat and movement the same. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Wrong. The game felt much too similar to Arkham City, even using most of the same game world. WB didn't try to put their own spin on the franchise. Instead, much like Troy Baker's Joker voice, they were doing an impression, but this time of Rocksteady. What they did have to develop on their own was the motivation and morals for a young Bruce Wayne. Very early on, they had to design missions around a younger, reckless Batman that they couldn't quite do with Kevin Conroy's mature, ultra-calculated version of Batman. Examples of this include the GCPD trying to arrest him constantly, people thinking he's a myth or a bat creature, and of course, learning about the Joker for the first time. Eric Holmes was WB Montreal's lead creative director on Arkham Origins. He and his team also made some very fun design choices that fans really enjoyed. In my opinion, they made the best looking Batsuit. They shortened the ears, which made him look a lot more like the New 52 style and a lot less like the long Halloween look that we were used to. They also redesigned the rest of the suit, going for a less manufactured look, more like pieces of gear thrown together that Bruce has either collected or invented. They also took the gray out of the suit, making it look like when Christian Bale spray paints it black in Batman Begins. Another choice in development that I do like, but it does have its problems, is the Christmas time setting. The city is truly beautiful to see, and I always want to play it on Christmas Eve. I like that they were able to create countless parallels in the city design. I love seeing the irony of dark and dangerous Gotham streets contrasted with bright and cheerful holiday decorations. It's kind of funny. It does make for a lovely sight to see, but once again, I have to come back to how bad the performance is. With the possibility of hundreds of tiny light sources being shown at once, the engine is trying to generate accurate shadows and reflections based off of all of these Christmas lights. It created terrible FPS drops anywhere there was a bunch of illumination. Just another reason WB Montreal should not have used Unreal 3. WB also made some very nice changes to how they shoot cutscenes compared to Rocksteady. Aligning with their young urban legend theme, they often angle the camera up at Batman or use his shadow to get an overpowering or menacing look. This can be seen when Batman decides to do his interrogation above a 30-foot Christmas tree.
Where is he?
I swear.
Damn. Wake up.
What happened?
Time to talk. Where's Cobblepot?
Let me go!
If you insist.
Please, stop! Stop! I'll talk. I'll tell you anything you want to know, please!
Too late. I already have what I need.
No!
This would work out great in their favor and would actually influence the camera work in Rocksteady's next game, Arkham Knight. For the first time in the series, we had a new composer. Christopher Drake replaced Ron Fish and Nick Arundel, who made the music for Asylum and City. Since Arkham Origins is a prequel and set on Christmas Eve, this gave Christopher Drake much more freedom in deciding how to differentiate his style from the previous games. He chose electronic tones, carols, heavy drums, and tried to avoid classic orchestra, which had been affiliated with Batman content in the past. I actually talked to Christopher Drake on Twitter about his inspiration for the soundtrack. He referenced taking cues from 1988's Die Hard, which some call the best Christmas movie ever. Die Hard's soundtrack featured many sleigh bells to highlight important details. Mr. Drake uses this a lot in the song The Night Before Christmas. Parts of the soundtrack were also layered, so WB could pull sections in and out seamlessly while the player moves through different parts of the city, all with their own vibe and musical hints. WB would also have to call up Christopher Drake on the phone and describe the scenes that he would have to design the sound for. And he did a great job for a composer who was not in the Canadian studio with the team. All of this added up to an average game that had more potential than execution and did not do enough to separate itself from its predecessors. Batman Arkham Origins was released on October 25th, 2013 for PC, Xbox 360, and PS3, but they probably should have delayed the PC version. They also released companion games for Nintendo 3DS and an iOS fighting game with the same name. Arkham Origins' release was not as highly praised as other entries in the franchise. Instead of winning many Game of the Year awards like Arkham City, it was getting average reviews, sitting around 74 on Metacritic. With reviewers trashing the lack of innovation and slow story, the game only sold 1 million copies in the first week, nowhere near the last game. A once great name was being dragged through the mud by every credible review site on the internet. So what happened? The reoccurring theme was that it didn't move the series forward in gameplay or story. Some felt it was just a stretched out version of Arkham City. The biggest problem, however, is a boring narrative. You can easily see the quality level drop off when Paul Dini left DC Comics. You might have noticed that I didn't run down the plot in this section of the documentary. That is because it isn't a fun story to tell, and I want you to watch the rest of the video. There's a Joker twist that everyone sees coming, and that's about it. I can tell you everything that happens in Arkham City, point by point, where Batman goes, who he talks to, what he needs. I can tell you how to beat the Mr. Freeze fight, but what I can't tell you is how Arkham Origins connects. How it connects to itself, it barely connects to Arkham Asylum, besides the fact that the Joker is locked up there at the end. But once again, this is 7 years before, so realistically, he just gets out over and over again. Nobody believes the Joker is locked up for 7 years. Here is the entire story of Arkham Origins in 10 words. Beat up 8 assassins and wait for the Joker scenes. It was a poorly put together story, and the main reason it did not sell very many copies. Some think the Joker pretending to be Black Mask was a good ending, but to me it just felt like a reverse of when Clayface was pretending to be the Joker in Arkham City. All in all, Batman Arkham Origins is worth a weekend playthrough in December if you love Batman games, and it might not have deserved the crazy public outcry it received. This marks the first time that the public was not happy with an Arkham game, and it turned many off to the franchise right before the biggest entry yet, In the final part of this documentary, we will discuss how Rocksteady returns with the epic finale, Batman: Arkham Knight.